This episode is presented by Ruvi, the most real indoor cycling experience that delivers the famous cycling routes to your home. Go to ruvi.com and start your free 14-day trial.
Tim, let's talk about Mathieu van der Poel and his just juggling talents, because, you know, he races mountain bike, he races cyclocross, he races unicycles, I don't know, he races on the road. He's doing everything, and there he was in Val d'Isole as well, racing. And I think a lot of us are probably thinking he was, quote unquote, taking it easy and not trying to risk everything. You know, his goal was later on in the season on February 5th, trying to win that 5th World Championship title. And then just 5 weeks after that, he's got the Spring Classics and then the Tour de France on the horizon. And of course, he wants to add to his tally. He's won the Tour de Flanders twice. He's won a stage in the Tour de France, Strade Bianche, Amstel Gold Race. There's so much pressure on this 27-year-old. He's also had a lot of missed opportunities, and I'm talking about the mountain bike run at the Olympics in Tokyo, and then he had to abandon the World Championships on the day of the race after having to start in the World Championships without sleeping that night. I want to add also, in the last week, court cleared Mathieu van der Poel in that case there with the miners in Australia. They were out partying in his hallway as he was trying to sleep the night before the Championships. Racing 250 kilometers the next day without sleep is tough. 250 kilometers alone must be tough. Tim, you know, with so much at stake, how much is Mathieu van der Poel going to risk on a course like that out there, what looked like an ice rink at times?
Well, I think it's important to look at this kind of in its entirety for Van der Poel, and not just one weekend at a time. So if you go back a month or so, you know, he was not racing, he was training, he was doing, Zwift Academy and Majorca, and came back a week early because he felt so good. And that's kind of like, you've got training camps to juggle, you've got freshness, you know, and that kind of builds into what your form is. You know, we talk about form all the time. But yeah, when you go back and you go back to the rest of 2022, you go back to 2021, where he spent a lot of time off the bike, injured. So, you know, I think that what we're seeing is a rider with immense talent. Obviously, we're seeing a rider with kind of spotty training in between injuries and events. And you really can't train through a lot of events. You can't train through travel to go to a World Cup in Italy. So, you know, however it's shaking out for him, I think that we're seeing, you know, when you compare what he does versus Wout van Aert seems like he has more consistency. He's got more intention, either in training blocks and racing, while it seems like Van der Poel is kind of chasing his tail a little bit. So we're seeing that kind of come through in some of these results, you know, where he is absolutely unbeatable on days like this. But then, you know, a few weeks later, and it's like, you know, where's Van der Poel? I don't think this is anything new. I don't think I'm really kind of breaking the bank with any kind of hot take. So, you know, this is just what it is. You know, and at 27, you're still learning. He showed up on the scene, winning absolutely everything in such dominant fashion. It's easy to have kind of bad habits, you know, and so you have to reassess, evolve a little bit. And he could be the best 30-year-old cyclist we've ever seen in a century, but he's not there yet. So who knows?
Well, I think a lot of it too is that he carries the weight of that Team Alpecin. When you think of Team Alpecin, you think of Mathieu van der Poel. I can't think of another big star on the team right off the top of my head. Whereas when you talk about Jumbo-Visma with Wout van Aert, you know, we could name so many. We have to use both of our hands, and then there's still some names as well. So there's a lot of pressure on his shoulder. And afterwards, the team, they were saying in the press clippings there, if we can get that back up on the screen, I think there's an interesting Dutch to English gigantic eggs or something in his pants. I didn't know what that meant, but you know, the team is managed by the Roodhoff brothers, and they were quoted there in the article. They said in advance they told him to take it easy, not to risk everything, and in fact they saw what happened to Elie Iserbyt, where, you know, and they said, as you know, with Elie Iserbyt, this is his whole season right there, out there on the cyclocross winter scene. Whereas Mathieu van der Poel, he has the Spring Classics coming up, and he still wants to win a Paris-Roubaix, and he's got other objectives out there on the horizon. it's difficult. I can imagine being in Team Alpecin versus like a Jumbo Visma.
Well, I can tell you, I'd much rather crash in mud than I would on frozen ground. That's for sure. So yeah, I mean, if he has these big goals coming up right around the corner and trying to fit it all in, that's ultimately the thing that he has to deal with. And I do know that the support from the team is second to none. That the team really is truly built around him. And the Rudolph brothers, have really put together a program that's best suited for him. I would say Tim Merlier is probably my favorite Alpecin Phoenix rider besides Van der Poel. So that would be my name that I can mention.
Jasper Philipsen as well. There we go.
There you
They
go.
come to you when you're not thinking of.